So there is a long-standing scholarly consensus that genocide perpetrators are mostly ordinary individuals transformed by extraordinary circumstances. Anyone, if placed in the right situation, would be capable of committing atrocities. Well, I think this consensus needs to be refined, at least in the case of Rwanda. I did not find all Rwandan perpetrators to be ordinary. I found evidence of important differences between them. They were simply heterogeneous. Not everyone had the same disposition toward the genocide. I also found at the same time that differences in dispositions did not fully explain why some Rwandans came to kill and others did not. Ultimately, I found that it was not just who you were, your disposition, that mattered. It was also who you knew and where you lived that also mattered. So social networks and settlement patterns were important. The idea that perpetrators are ordinary has considerable scholarly support. The experimental work in social psychology conducted by Solomon Asch on conformity, Stanley Milgram on obedience and authority, Philip Zimbardo on role adoption, all point in the direction of the ordinary perpetrator thesis. Christopher Browning's book, Ordinary Men, emphasized the ordinariness in the backgrounds of the members of the German Reserve Police Battalion in World War II. Even the title of Hannah Arendt's account of the trial of Adolf Eichmann, a report on the banality of evil, suggests ordinariness is true not only of low-level perpetrators, but also of the high-level architects and planners as well. But in what respects do we mean perpetrators are ordinary? Well, if it means in terms of their socio-demographic backgrounds, then yes, this was largely true for Rwanda's killers, I found. The perpetrators I surveyed had few socio-demographic characteristics that distinguished them from the non-perpetrators in my sample, other than being more likely to be male. But if ordinariness means in terms of attitudes or disposition towards the genocide, then I would disagree. I found evidence that perpetrators varied in their commitment to the violence. So broadly, I found they could be crudely classified by decreasing intensity of commitment to the genocide into extremists, opportunists, conformists, and also resistors. Having said this, disposition alone did not fully explain why some Rwandans came to kill and others not. So by my calculation, about 1 in 4 Hutu adult men committed at least one act of violence during the genocide. This is a shocking statistic, but it still means that 3 in 4, 75%, did not. So what then explains differential selection into the violence? Well, I had 2 hypotheses. The first was that where you lived mattered. So I geocoded the household locations of about 3,000 Rwandans in one community that I knew well, and constructed a map showing the settlement patterns of the perpetrators, the victims, and the bystanders. And what I found is that the perpetrators tended to live in clusters close to each other. They lived in the same neighborhoods. In fact, I measured this. So if we define neighborhoods in terms of the distance from a household, then neighbors living within 300 meters radius of this household were more likely to be drawn into the violence than individuals who did not. And this neighborhood effect tapered off after 300 meters. So this neighborhood effect led me to the second hypothesis, which concerned social influence. So if neighborhoods mattered, then perhaps who you knew mattered. So I mapped and compared in detail the social networks of over 100 perpetrators and non-perpetrators. And I found that the perpetrator networks were different. They were bigger. Perpetrators were simply better connected in their community than non-perpetrators, somewhat counterintuitively. So social capital also has a dark side. It can be used to bring and bind together individuals for pernicious purposes, as well as desirable ones too. So in sum then, I found that dispositional, that's who you were, situational, where you lived, and relational, who you knew, factors all work together to explain why some individuals came to kill and others not.